So good morning, everyone. Good morning. For me, change is often hard. People are involved. Often we get some resistance, but then we can actually draw into what people's frustrations are all about. But in some industries, people don't see the need for change. They're in a comfortable environment, and certainly technology is something which they don't want to get pushed upon them. So this morning, I've got the great pleasure of introducing Steve Snowden. Steve was former head of Lean Agile at Mashreq Bank. He's got 30 years experience in financial services, working for the likes of Lloyds and Mashreq. He's a good friend of LEA's. We've seen him many times. And he's actually, I'll let you into a little bit of a secret. He's actually living it up right now in Cyprus and enjoying some sun and training. And So good morning, Steve.
Thanks a lot, Darren. Good morning to you, and good morning to everyone, or afternoon, or whatever the time zone is where you're dialing into. It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to share some of my experiences with you all. So without further ado, let's kick on. So what I'm going to do for the next 20-25 minutes is share some experiences with you, both from a theoretical, but also very much important from a practical implementation and tangible side. And then Darren and I will cover some Q&A at the end, if that's okay with you, through the chat sessions or just verbally. So what we're going to cover is really looking at Lean's role in a digital transformation. The areas that we're going to cover is about the perception maybe of Lean. You know, do people think it's a little bit old-fashioned now, not quite as sexy as some of the robotics that are kicking around these days? As Darren mentioned, the need for change, you know, what's driving that? And then we'll go a bit more detail into the barriers for digital strategy and how Lean and Agile can overcome these. But what's critically important is, you know, we're not all Microsoft, we're not all Google or Toyota. You've got to make it work for your organization and understand what drives your organization to help you adapt accordingly. I'll then go on to look at some tangible approaches that we took and how we sustain and standardize certain things, and finishing off very importantly with the people side of it. So as Darren quickly alluded to, I'm not a theoretical Lean student. You'll not see me published with the Shingo Institute Awards or anything like that. But I do have a lot of experience in the financial sector across the globe, and work with some fantastic teams and people accordingly. So my experience starts from a commercial relationship manager all the way through process mapping, marketing, ending up in change management, and ending up at head of Lean. And I'm currently pressing my pause button, taking time out, healthy body, healthy mind, all that, and doing lots of training for triathlons. So enjoying life at the moment. So let's get a look into now the perception. So actually, for those that dialed in, Jim Womack yesterday, I thought was quite good. One of his slides said that we, as in Lean, we're not obsolete as long as the world is full of waste, and there's a need to provide more value for our customers. But I think that's very relevant. But historically, there has been pushback. You know, certainly the last 3-4 years, I've experienced pushback when I was working in the Middle East, that it wasn't as sexy as robotics or digitalization, and that it was a bit more internal focused, and that it took a while to impact on the customers. And certainly in the financial market, people were thinking, well, how, you know, we're not Toyota, we're not a manufacturing unit, we're a finance company. So we're a bank. So how does Lean help us? So the next few slides, I'll show you how we kind of broke down some of those barriers and how we very much showed how Lean played a huge role in both the bank's performance, but also its digital journey. But let's touch on the need for change first. You know, it is true, you know, customers want what they want. You know, they want to pay a certain price for it. And if you, as your organization or your company can't provide that, they'll go elsewhere. You know, companies are very much commodities these days. whether it's from the Generation X, myself, through the Generation Y or the millennials or digital natives, as we call them, through to the current Generation Z, people who are born with a smartphone or a tablet in their hand, as it were. People assume it's kind of the generation kind of Y and Z that are driving a lot of this change. But my argument is actually everyone has been driving this change. We've seen over the last 2 years with the pandemic how, it really is true. Necessity is the mother of all invention. How when you're forced into a situation, it's amazing what you can do and what you can do quickly. I've seen examples in Dubai, the road traffic department in Dubai, things on the registrations in minor accidents, even selling a property. What used to be an absolute minefield of red tape and paperwork is now all of a sudden online, paperless, done through your smartphones. And then you compare that to what I found out earlier this year, was when I was in the UK, trying to just do simple things that involve me physically going to see someone, or mask to mask, as it were. So you've got a big disparity there. So the need for change is often driven by different sections. And then you look at kind of what's driving that change. Is it a customer driven demand, or is it internal views that you need to reduce costs, etc.? So I think the key thing is be mindful that one size does not fit all. Sometimes there are internal changes you need to make, but you can't and mustn't, in my humble opinion, ignore the customer element of it. That's why in Lean, when we were with Mashrek, we did VOC, or voice of the customer, and always asking the question, how does this change positively impact our customer? Or if it's an internal change, at worst, keep the status quo. Because without that, there's a danger you fall into certain traps, things like Kodak and Nokia, to a degree, slightly ignoring what was happening with the market and with its customers, and obviously paying the price. But also, if you've got a fantastic product, that can get duplicated. So a lot of it down the customer service is often a differentiator. So people like Monzo, one of the new banks in the UK, their customers were given credit cards and just asked to play with them, really testing the processes. What features and benefits would you like to see? So all of a sudden, a certain set of customers become massively involved in that organization's ability to deliver a truly customer-centric product. And then you're moving into people who actually want to promote or think ahead of what the customer is going to be wanting. So your Amazon and your Netflix and your Facebooks of this world, who look at your abilities and what you click on and actually tailor make that customer journey for you. So it's not just the need to change, but it's also what's driving that change. And that visual in the center there of the Pope inaugurations, that's only 8 years difference. And just look at the difference in terms of that smartphone usage. I think it is quite a startling view to behold on that one. When we look at the barriers of executing a digital strategy, one of the key things I think to look at first is some of the terminology. It's something that I had to get my head around. I'm not a tech wizard, but I very much interpret technology with the business to understand what's the impact going to be. So the key thing here, this is the one I often use, which is from Oracle, is digitization is you're getting a process or a task and you're taking it from paper-based and you're moving it to automation, or you're making something from an analog into a digital format. That way is actually done at a process level. And the next level up is often harder, because that's when you're looking at applying that across a grander scale. You're looking at the different technologies and the capabilities, and then how do you and your customers use those in a better way? So digitization feeds into digitalization, as it were, and ultimately up into your digital transformation or your digital strategy. And this is key, because this is where the company or the organization has to reimagine how you're going to use the three key elements: the technology, the people, and the process, to move your business and organization forward, aligned with your customer-centric journey. Now, those are the three very key things, because that's where Lean comes in. the people and the processes more heavily than technology, but very much relevant in all three. And what I thought was interesting is back in 2015, Price Waterhouse did a survey, and that was the question that they asked, what is your key challenge to your organization achieving its digital vision? And these were the top 5 that came out. And you can see them there on the screen. Now, in view of time, I'm not going to go through all 5. I've picked 3. And what we're going to do in a couple of slides is show you the examples of how Mashreq overcame these 3. So the inflexible or slow processes, the lack of the properly skilled team, and the lack of alignment. Okay. So overcoming barriers, critically important if you want to achieve anything in this world, all the challenges that we face. So the first one is looking at the inflexibility slow processes. Mashreq was quite lucky in terms of the time it aligned a lot of the lean and the agile and the digital together, because we'd had 5 or 6 years behind us of pure lean improvements, mapping processes end to end in an organization. You'd be surprised at the number of businesses that don't have their processes documented. You don't have the handoffs. You don't know the upstream and the downstream dependencies. You don't have a detailed work or standardized work spread over that whole mapped process. So that was massive in terms of our solid foundation for us to move forward on. So we always had an understanding of a review on a quarterly period of what changes we were making, how the TATs were being reduced, and capturing these improvements, which is very important, and making sure that they never slip back to kind of old processes. So this is certainly how we adapted lean to overcome that in terms of the inflexibility and slow processes. The next one was the skill teams. And this is where we started our journey back in 2011. We had a consultancy company come in, and they were with us for 9 months, and they picked a core senior management team, of which I was one member of. And from that early start, we were intensively training with our background of customer-centric commercial and operational senior managers with that experience, and then bolting on a lot of the continuous improvement and lean knowledge. And every single deployment and project we did, it went through a process of train the trainer. So we're really spreading out this DNA of inquisitiveness, of continuous improvement, of moving from 20 problem seekers and problem solvers to hundreds and thousands of problem seekers and problem solvers. Very much a change of mindset. And through that, then building internal certifications, so that you're making people sit down once a year and look at certain techniques and making sure that they're up to date with the core elements of continuous improvement and lean and agile aspects. And we actually, I'll touch on the people side, we actually made that a lot centric to the organization. Finally, we look at the lack of the alignment and the clarity. And again, here, we're looking at how we added agile into the lean fold. So we have certain tribes and squads and very detailed roles and responsibilities. Who is going to do what? A better collaboration and better communication, breaking down some of these silos that we see in all organizations, and banks are better at than most. And very deployment of the agile coaches from within. So we didn't go outside and hire agile coaches. They actually came from the core centralized lean team. So that lean agile team all of a sudden kind of knew the organization, and therefore the clarity and the alignment was maintained. Okay. I mentioned before about we're not all Google and we're not all Toyota. And so it's critically important that you make it work for your organization, because there's nothing worse than buying something off the shelf or a consultancy company coming in, kind of dusting down one organization's name, putting your organizations and kind of handing it to you, say that there you go. It's critically important that you make it work for your organization. So within Mashreq, what we did is we'd had experience with our lean objectives, as you can see on the left-hand side there. We knew what those were, and it was starting to get very much in the DNA of the organization. We then wrapped those tools and techniques in with that agile framework. So there's lots of commonalities and similarities between the lean and the agile. The customer-centric aspect, the desire to improve quality, making sure that the learning is there, and empowering people, making sure that the decisions are made as close to the customer as you possibly could, and making sure that this cross-collaboration was there. So on one side, you've got very much the efficiencies and the aspects and taking waste out of it with the lean. On the other side, with agile, you've got the speed, you've got the swift changes, but importantly, you don't lose control. It's a regulated environment. It's very important that there's rules and regulations we can't not do. But by doing a lot of this detail closer to the customer, you're having far better informed decisions to be made and far better changes, therefore, as a result. So it's very much tied into the values of the organization, and critically key is obviously it's driven from the top, driven by our CEO and the C-suite, making sure that they all kind of tied into that. And it's understanding how the senior management and what their businesses needed to achieve. We could clearly demonstrate how bringing in lean and agile would help achieve that for them. Just take a sip of water. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's have a look at some tangible examples here of how we actually combined the lean tools into the agile. We started off with a phased approach. We did some lean agile projects. And what's key here is that we actually had a team, cross-functional team set up. And what's important with a cross-functional team is that you have all the people needing to deliver that particular solution to the problem statement you've identified in that one area. So everyone had the roles and responsibilities. They had the empowerment to make decisions. You weren't getting a risk person or a tech person having to go back to their department and seek authorization to bring it up. So the speed of the changes were massively improved. You very much were using some of the lean tools and techniques. If I can just highlight here. So you've got lots of the lean tools and techniques, the value stream mapping, our 7 wastes, very much the data analysis through Pareto, etc., root cause problem solving, all those that were very much relevant for 5-6 years. Then we add into it some of the agile framework. So the blockages, the hurdles, the OKRs or objectives, key results, which we used to set every 90 days. It came in an environment where you were moving from a monthly meeting discussing dubious data to having daily stand-ups of 15 minutes where people were talking about what they're going to do today and what the backlogs and blockages were for them to achieve that. So very much working in collaboration, but that's how we combine the lean and the agile. So you've got the tools and the techniques, and you've got the framework on the agile aspect. And ultimately that meant we moved from the silo approach here, where this head of business could blame all these individual areas for him not achieving his goal, to an area where he was empowered. He became a mini CEO in effort, and all these areas were working from him, to the point of dotted reporting lines. So he now had the ability to report on the head of risk, or to the head of risk, and say, look, your guy isn't doing what I need him to do as part of the goals. So it was shared objectives, shared goals, and very much a mechanism of reporting that was breaking down the barriers. Certain areas remained independent. So compliance, you could not influence compliance. You couldn't influence the lending or the risk guy to make a decision, but you had that dotted area. So in terms of their overall impact, it was still monitored. So very much breaking down the silos. And this part is where Gemba really came into its own. The top management coming down, standing in these huddles on the shop floor, seeing things work and the backlogs happening. You're an organization that needs a bottom line. Every organization needs to make improvements, whether it's the customer impact and ultimately on the bottom line. So having to clearly demonstrate how these impacts were benefiting the organization was fundamental for me as head of Lean and Agile, to clearly demonstrate I couldn't do my budget and say I need X million a year to run this department if I wasn't adding that value tenfold, 20-fold to the organization. So this is a few little examples from back in the day, 2018, a few years ago now, but clearly showing where, you know, we were making a huge amount of difference. So client-facing time in our corporate environment, we remove waste, we improve efficiencies and processes, we take processes off the relationship management and give it to support staff because that's intellect waste. And the impact is we give an extra 160 meetings to that business on a weekly basis. That's 160 more opportunities to meet your customers, both existing and potential, to do more business and help them and their businesses succeed. So these are the key elements that we're really clearly showing, and all this was tracked and reported and reviewed on a quarterly basis. So if you're seeing these extra people, you'd expect something to happen as a result of it. And that's what we used to track. And the 4 key areas we see is under revenue and cost, process efficiency, customer experience. So again, we're looking externally. We're making sure we're keeping our customer. What impacts are we having to our customer? And then finally, our staff. How are we improving the knowledge and the capability of our staff? And those areas I'll touch on a little bit on the final slide on the people. It's all well and good making changes, but if you don't sustain them and you don't have the ability to standardize and roll out further, then you really could get into difficulty. So we would have, like I said, I've talked about the daily tribes and squad meetings. We would have a scrum of scrums as well at a higher tribe level. And that again would be once a week or monthly, depending. But what you're discussing is facts, figures, and data of what's happening this week, what isn't happening this week, and what the blockages are, and whose help do I need to fix that. And it's actually taking actionable items away and bringing those back to the organization. And then finally, at the top end, you'd have a quarterly one by the CEO and all the other C-suite. So this is the ability to talk about independent communication of what the factual achievements have been in that quarter. Previously, they would have had backlogs escalated far quickly to them. So you had the CEO being contacted if you need his authorization, often on a daily or a weekly basis, rather than once a quarter for authorizations. But this actually shows how the linkage then worked to make sure we standardize things. And finally, last but by no means least, the most important part, you can't achieve any proper kind of digital journey or lean agile aspect without your people, without having a great team behind you. And it's important to listen to what their gripes are. So in every deployment, we'd had part of the voice of customer, we'd have a good news, bad news pictorially about what the staff wanted to improve on. And a lot of it was coming down to greater ownership, more training, and making sure that that was embedded. So it's very much about upskilling. So part of this journey is we're starting with external qualifications and then bringing that into a core team. So again, repeating what we did with Lean, but for the Lean Agile and some of the digital aspects, making sure we had internal experts that could then do train the trainer, and then getting to a point where we started running our internal course. So recognizing that not everyone needs to be an expert, but if you bring that knowledge level down a little bit, that everyone's aware of it, you give the ability for these problem solvers and problem seekers to increase in terms of its number. And we got to the point where actually we have an annual test now, and part of that is a Lean Agile certification that you get a certificate for sitting down and passing. It's a high pass mark, and it's done once a year. So the organization treats Lean Agile at the same level as something like anti-money laundering. And for a bank, that was pretty impressive for us. So if you don't pass that after a number of attempts, it actually has an impact to your bonus. So I think that's the key thing about this is really looking at the people part of it and making sure that you're achieving what you need to and you're removing some of those barriers. Don't employ smart people and put them in a straitjacket. It's important about giving them the capability to show what you saw in them. and ultimately achieving what you want to. So hopefully that brings us to the end. If there are any questions, I've got some contact details there. I'll hand back to Darren now. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. I've got a couple of questions of my own, but Richard has just asked, do you think that the team collaborating digitally is important in a digital transformation?
Yes, absolutely. The digital aspect, getting business and technology together is critically important, because if you leave technology out of the roadmap to a degree, then you're not leveraging the best use of what your organization already has. And likewise, if technology in itself just goes ahead with the digital journey, then you don't, or you could easily miss out on the customer-centric element of that's a great improvement, but our customers don't really want it. So how are you ensuring that that customer impact through the business is actually getting born into the design?
Great. So even a small team that is located together can really collaborate with their customers digitally.
Yeah, absolutely, hugely. The way that technology is now with apps and what have you, it's easy to produce an app, to have that area. I mentioned like Monza. I mean, they started really small, about sending out like 50 customers with a credit card and saying like, use this and do the feedback. Yeah. And so you can have really at a small scale to have that level of impact to make sure that your customers are involved in that digital journey with you.
Yeah. In the UK, you'll know yourself that a lot of the traditional bricks and mortar banks have got the low customer satisfaction.
Yeah, very much
the
so.
The likes of Monza and Starling are the top of the tree.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Must be doing something. Must be doing something
right. I mean, when's the last time? A question for all of us. When's the last time you had to physically go into a branch, and when's the last time you wrote a checkout? The world's moved on, and these kind of our monoliths of the traditional organizations, the Barclays, the Lloyds of this world, they've got to make sure they move as well, because if they're not offering the types of services that the customers are demanding, customers will just go elsewhere for it.
Yeah. I've got two questions for you from my perspective. First of all, what were the challenges? What were the pitfalls and challenges that maybe the organization fell into and had to resolve?
Yeah.
And secondly, just the point about qualifications. I've seen lots of organizations where maybe there's 400 people with certificates in a 1200 organization, but then they don't practice it. So they sit the exam, get the certificate, and then forget it basically. So my second part of the question then is, okay, so sit in the exam or going through the building the knowledge and gaining that knowledge.
Yeah.
How did you then ensure they practice it regularly and you actually embedded that thinking?
Sure. Well, just on the first one, the kind of challenges or the pitfalls. When we started Lean in 2011, we then molded Lean in with Agile about 6 years later. So the molding together was far easier because we'd had that credibility already built for 5 or 6 years. But to begin with, what was happening is we actually said it was a leap of faith. We realized that we needed to change because it was a massively competitively environment, highly regulated, highly banked in the Middle East. So customers would have 3 or 4 banks. It certainly was a buyer's kind of market, as it were. So we knew we needed to change. So the pitfalls were, it was a leap of faith, and we had to show quick wins very quickly. And I mean really quickly. The first 6 months, we had to show the tangible impact we were making through some of the Lean deployments. And some of those early ones were generally in the branch network. So it was around, how long does it take to open an account? How long does it take for a customer to get a credit card? So all these kind of tasks were massively reduced. So customers were then proactively reached out to saying, come in, is this any quicker for you? We're changing how we queued in the branches by looking at spaghetti diagrams and all those sorts of things. So making quick wins, giving it tangibility, and showing to the senior management how that improved your bottom line. So physically seeing the number of credit card sales going up because it was a quicker, faster process now. So the product was good, just the channel and the delivery mechanism was quite poor and archaic. Right. So showing those quick wins is how we kind of got over those early challenges, and making sure it was aligned with what that senior manager wanted to deliver that quarter or that year. That was critically important. So if their goal was to improve their turnover 10 times, we would show them, on your natural progression now, you're never going to achieve that. You need a massive hockey stick improvement. So let us work with you to do that.
Right. And were they largely focused on customer processes?
Yes, initially early days, very much so. And then we started looking more end to end. So looking at customer journeys. So looking at upstream and downstream impacts, because even if we made something very efficient in the center, if before or after that, the customer fulfillment bit wasn't good, then the customer experience wasn't good either. So it was very much looking at the whole end-to-end journey, improve that as we improved and got more experience. In terms of the qualifications and those aspects, these internal certifications, I think it might have been a cultural thing for the Middle East as well, to be honest. Everyone does like the certificate. How we sustained it, though, is what we were asking from the business when we did a deployment of Lean Agile, is we had new processes in place, new performance metrics, and we would go back every 6 months to sustain it. So it was like a mini audit in a way. You would go back through a process of observations, Q&As, and physical evidence. You would see how that department was doing its own continuous improvement. How were they practicing the skills they'd learned? What changes had they made in the last 6 months, and where were they on that? So that sustain, and we scored the sustain as well. So you either passed or you failed. And if you passed, you got a congratulatory note from the CEO. If you failed, then you got a visit from the CEO. But the visit was kind of a case of, well, what's stopping you doing these new things? What's happening? So the sustain was really how we drove that into the DNA of the organization.
When in the change management field, one of the biggest areas that has been identified as why change fails is not having, I think it's something like 70% of the reason is not having active and visible leadership.
Yeah.
And it strikes me a lot of what you've spoken about today, even with that last comment about the CEO, that is actually having active and visible leadership. Yes. Otherwise, people will get the message this is not important.
I absolutely. I mean, they say that, if it's important enough, you will spend time doing it. So when you're looking, the first thing we used to do is I used to go and print off the outlook of any head of business, his for that week, and sit down with them and saying, right, where are you spending the majority of your time? Because that is what your staff's perception of what's most important to you is.
Yeah.
And it used to blow their mind. I says, it should be on about, driving your business. And rarely was it until they got the understanding of, I need to spend my time on what's making that impact. And therefore, if your staff see you doing it, they're going to do it as a result.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a similar exercise, actually. We have a question from Bernard. What's the best way to score the sustainment?
In terms of scoring the sustain, we tried to keep it simple. So it was 0, 1, and 2. 0 was no evidence at all of them exercising the new skills and practices or processes that they'd earned. 1 was partial evidence, and 2 was full evidence. So over about 20 or 30 areas, we would go and score them 0, 1, and 2, and then we'd look at ultimately kind of over the 5 lenses: process efficiency, performance management, voice of customer. They'd get a score for each lens, and then an overall pass or fail rate. Now, interesting, we started at 50%, but every 6 months that went up 5%. So they had to constantly improve. So doing what they did one year, if they did exactly the same next year, they may have passed to begin with, they would have failed year 2 because the bar raises. With life, you've got to do something more. So we'd score on them on that rate, 0, 1, 2, and then the score is ranked accordingly.
Okay, excellent. We've got one more question from Richard in the UK. Have you used design thinking to design new services or products? And do you see this as complementary to lean and agile?
Totally. I see design thinking as I try to keep everything kind of simplify things. Design thinking for me is just another way of talking about the customer's involvement in how your organization designs its products and services. Now, that might be an internal customer, but generally it should be an external customer in my view. So very much the case of design thinking should be, I feel, part of ultimately what journey you want in your organization to take, because how can you hand on heart say that those changes are going to actually mirror what your customers are wanting? So that design thinking, very much getting that collaboration together.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve.
No,
yeah, I think we've had a good session. Great questions.
Yeah, excellent questions. Thank you, everyone.
So if anybody wants to reach out to Steve, they'll find his contact details on the screen, or reach out to myself, and we'll let you know in a couple of weeks' time what we've got planned for the future.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay. Apart from that, have a great day.
Yeah, thanks again, all.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.